What's up, guys? Here to talk about The Void, a movie you can see in only a few certain theaters right now, but you can also order it on certain services like Vudu, or I ordered it right off the Xbox myself, their video store. Um, it was like $7 to rent and $10 to own, so I bought it. Um, so this is a horror movie that's a that feels like a bit of a throwback to horror movies from back in the 80s. And part of why it feels that way, it isn't just because it uses you know, less CGI, maybe no CGI, it's hard to say. Um, it's not just because of that, the low amount of CGI. It's also because for the most part, horror movies nowadays, to me at least, revolve around certain subject matter. I mean, you do have exceptions to the rule, but by and large, I feel like we can all admit that there's a certain trend toward, ghosts, possession, witches, devil stuff, all that kind of broad kind of category of things. And a lot of that has to do with horror being kind of a lower budget genre, and those being lower budget endeavors. And they make a lot of bang for their buck. You look at something like The Conjuring, and that makes so many more times what it costs to make. Um, However, this film itself is a low budget film. Um, you know, but that's part of why it's not a wide release is that I think they knew it'd be tough to market as a big budget film because the thing is when they do a film like this, like in 2011, they decided to do a prequel to The Thing, which a lot of people consider a remake because it has the same name. Which it's really weird that they titled it exactly the same, but it is technically a prequel because it's not. It actually leads into the events of John Carpenter's film, which itself is considered a remake. Um, I don't totally consider John Carpenter's film a remake because the original The Thing is The Thing from Another World didn't really follow the source material especially well. And when you have a movie, when you make a movie and it's like the another in a line of movies based on an actual source material, and you're just following the source material as opposed to following the film before it. I'm not sure that's a remake. I don't know. I don't think it's the same thing. It's not the same thing as say I can't think of a remake right now. As oh well, like RoboCop. When they remade RoboCop, that was clearly a remake. That's they clearly just tried to make the same movie again but differently. Um, there was no like RoboCop novel that both films were based on and trying to adapt. It's not like every time someone makes Hamlet, they're not remaking whatever the first Hamlet movie was. You know what I mean? But all that aside, when I'm getting so off track, but when they did The Thing in 2011, it was going to be this big movie in theaters, and it's the kind of movie, that's you can't when you don't do ghosts and stuff like that, you need effects, you need creature effects, and those can actually be relatively low budget today because it does, because you can do practical effects. It costs more to do CGI, but what happened is with that movie they wanted to do practical effects because they wanted to honor the original The Thing. John Carpenter's The Thing with which was a masterwork in practical effects, is amazing practical effects. And what happened is for whatever reason the studio wasn't happy, you know, because studios are stupid. And what they ended up doing is covering all their practical effects and CGI for all this extra money, but they did it with so little time left leading up to the film's release, and it ended up, like a lot of it's unfinished looking CGI, and then the movie really suffered because of it. Like, not only did you not get whatever, however, and I've seen the practical effects work because you can watch. There's a lot of featurettes on what it looked like. I mean, you don't get to see what it like. The thing is with behind the scenes footage, everything always looks better in the film, but you still get a sense, and it's like, wow, that looked better than what we got in the film. And it's a real shame we didn't get what the film could have been. So the film could have been better just based on that. And then of course there's the fact that the CGI they did was unfinished because they wanted to meet their deadline, and while still insisting on meeting their deadline, they redid the special effects because some studio guys were like, "Nah, people don't like these effects anymore. They want CGI," um, which is so misguided. So, like I said, that's why this movie is not a wide release. That's why this movie could not attract a cast like the movie Life. Life is a similar. That's a big budget kind of horror movie that came out, which is an exception to the rule that I'm talking about, but it did attract people like, they got like Jake Gyllenhaal and Ryan Reynolds to be in it, and this big budget, and part of that is because they are making this CGI heavy feature, so they gotta throw big names in it too. They gotta do all this stuff to make sure that you actually go see it. Whereas a movie where they're like, oh, we're gonna use practical effects and have it look cooler, they're like, oh no, we don't want anything to do with that. You can, throw that out on like 10 theaters across the country and on demand and see how you do. And we're not gonna, no acting talent's gonna want to be in it. I mean, no. To be fair, the actors are fine in it. I'm not saying they're not acting talent. I'm saying they're not like big names that draw crowds in. And a lot of people probably haven't even heard of the film. So, and that's to me that was just me just going on and on about why this is a throwback. Man, I can really go on and on, I guess. So that's what makes this kind of a throwback to the 80s, is that it's it's the use of effects combined with the type of horror it is. Um, and it's not the type of horror we get as much of anymore. And when we do, it does tend to be low budget, but it doesn't tend to be this good. And that's one thing I'm gonna say right now is that before I get into criticisms and such, you need to know that I loved this movie. So no matter what I have to say negative about it, just bear that in mind. There's a certain duality of trying to criticize movies. Is you have to get past the fact that even movies you love sometimes have to be criticized, and it's tough. And I can expect people see the movie and love it and be like, "How dare you say this about it?" But whatever. I'm just gonna say what I think it did right and wrong as best I can. Now, to start off with, when I talk about what kind of horror movie it is, that's one of the things. A lot, it's what drew me to the movie in the first place. However, the previews are kind of quick, and they don't give you the sense of confusion that's actually present in the film. When I say confusion, what I mean is that it's such the throwback to the 80s that I feel like they threw too many ideas in at once. Like, you know, I've seen people, I saw reviews going in likening it to The Thing, which I already brought up The Thing. And I went in to watch it, and yeah, very early on, you'll see elements to the film where you're like, oh yeah, this is kind of like The Thing. But there's all these different directions it goes in though, and while almost all of them I can go, oh, that's like that feels kind of like this 80s horror movie or that 80s horror movie. It does feel like a lot of things thrown in a blender, like their throwback idea just took so many ideas at once and threw them together, and it mostly works. But part of the problem is like when you first watch it, if you're expecting any one certain thing, you might be disappointed, I guess, because um, like when I just compared it to the thing. I just told you people compared it to the thing. But if you go into the film with that mindset, it does not live up to the thing because it is not as focused on the type of it's not as focused as the thing. The thing is a certain type of movie, and you can expect certain type of scares and scenes from it. And this film is not. I'm trying not to be too spoilery about the film because this is a film that a lot of people will not have seen. This is not a review that anyone's gonna watch if I'm filling it with spoilers because this is gonna be an underseen film, and hopefully I can help remedy that by talking about what's good and bad about it. But um, yeah, it's not focused. I'm trying to think of a way to give you an idea. Like all right, it's just I'm just picturing so many different '80s film influences thrown together. It just runs from The Thing to Prince of Darkness to Hellraiser to The Beyond to all these different films, during its running time, and that can be good. But I feel like it could have, certain things could have been fleshed out more. It could have been a longer film. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, seeing a film and wanting it to be longer. Honestly, like that was one of the things I said is that was one of the few horror movies I ever watched where I thought, wow, this could have been like 3 hours long, and I would have kept watching because like I wanted more of just about everything in it. But it's also like it can be kind of a problem, like I said, because you could be underwhelmed. You could be like, I don't feel like I got enough of this or enough of that. There's all these crazy things in the film that you kind of want to get more of. To give you a basic idea of the plot without getting too spoilery, is it starts with this guy and he's running from this house, and there's a couple guys chasing him, and this is very The Thing. If you remember The Thing, it begins with the dog getting chased by these two guys shooting at a dog, the Norwegians in the helicopter, and that right away made me think of The Thing when, especially since people were already comparing it to The Thing. So I'm right away making assumptions based on that parallel. This guy's running, and they're talking about how he's not going to get far, because he's running, he's off in the woods, and I think he's wounded or something, as I recall. And he begins stumbling out of the woods, though, and a police officer finds him. It's like, oh, now he's gonna get someplace. And the police officer ends up bringing him to this hospital that's had some fire damage. I guess the better hospital was a little further away, and they didn't wanna go there. And this is where the whole rest of the film is set, is in this hospital, is what you need to know. And there all kinds of stuff begins to transpire from this point forward, and I don't want to spoil too much, but the title, obviously plays into it. There's all these ideas about what happens beyond death during it, which glad I had footage of Pillars of Eternity to play for you here, which is a game all about souls and crap. So that's slightly relevant, right? So the void, there's stuff about the void. But there's all these different things going on in the film, for sure. Um, so let me get to more of some things that I think could have been better. Um, the creature effects in it, while really cool and not something you see much nowadays, are definitely not up to a movie like The Thing. Which is weird to say, because even though this is a low budget film, and I acknowledge it's a low budget film, and The Thing in its day was a theatrical release, like an actual wide release, with comparatively, it would have been a bigger budget film. I don't. I couldn't say for sure how big budget the thing was for its day. It probably even for its day wasn't a huge budget film, but it certainly wasn't an indie film. Um, but it's still, this long later, if you're gonna do similar kind of stuff to the thing and your effects aren't up to par. Not to say I don't think anything has been up to par with the effects the thing has done, but a lot of stuff hasn't attempted it as part of the thing, and so that's like slightly a shame. But for someone like me who just appreciates seeing anyone attempt stuff like this, it was fun. But it definitely wasn't. I think they made up for it a little by doing their own thing with it. That it's not just like let's rip off what the thing did. Like they do their own kind of thing. But there is a problem with it where the film doesn't establish clear rules for why this stuff happens or why it happens to certain people. Like like I had theories going in about this and that and they didn't totally pan out and it didn't totally make sense to me. You know what was going on in the film because, like I said, I feel like there's a lot of ideas thrown at you in the film, and they're not all fully developed. Like I'd really like them to do a sequel, and not your generic trashy horror movie sequel, like a real sequel that expands on the ideas of this and gets into more of what's going on in this. Um, but other than that, I don't know. It's just you know I've got to criticize certain aspects of it because I feel like it could have been now the main reason I'm criticizing is for me this could have been like the absolute best horror film since the thing was released, like without a doubt. And to some of you that might be like a huge thing to say. For me it's not the biggest thing to say. I like horror movies, but I feel like since the 80s it's been kind of eh. I mean, I've liked plenty of them. I watch plenty of them. I still watch plenty of them. But there's so many of them where it's like, you watch it and then, all right, I move on with my life. I never need to watch that again. And I love this film. Honestly, this film would make a top list of horror films for me, but I feel like it could have been so much higher. I feel like it could have been like I could have told you without a doubt this was the best horror film of the past decade or something, and I'm more shaky about it because I feel like there's stuff they could have done more with. Um, and there's like interesting places they go that I would have liked to seen more of. Again, I thought all the actors were fine. The music was probably fine. That's probably not the best thing to say about a horror movie. That's another thing is like I think they probably could have done better with and I know this is part of the production costs, like stuff like the look and the atmosphere and the music. That stuff is not on a level of something like The Thing or The Beyond or movies like that. It was all fine by today's standards, no question. But when I look at like horror movies that I consider the absolute greats, those are things that absolutely hold it back. The actors are fine, but I don't think besides a certain character, I don't think any of them were really up there with like in The Thing. Like Kurt Russell was great in The Thing, but in The Thing everyone was great. Like I thought they were all great, all those characters, but Kurt Russell was such a great protagonist in that. Um, so it's a hard movie to rate for me because I can honestly see a lot of the things that a lot about it could be considered drawbacks for a lot of people. But the thing is, for me, is I've watched like 7 horror movies in the past month, all new, and every single one of them has been so much more forgettable than this. And that's to me like that's just the way horror movies have been. Like on a relative scale, for me, this film is incredible. Um, on a relative scale of horror films over the past decade or so, it's one of the best. It's up there with something like It Follows. It Follows, for instance, to me is a better made film. Like the soundtrack and the editing and the cinematography, all that stuff is really well done. It's a really tense film. This is cool. This is a cooler film to me. Like I really like the stuff going on in this film better. Like It Follows was cool, and it's this, all this. It's about death or AIDS or something. That's interesting. The allegorical or symbolic movies. Those are interesting. That they don't get me going as much as crazy fucked up horror movies do with, absolutely nuts premises. It's like it's interesting when they mean something, but I want something more. So to me it's up there with something like It Follows, just on the basis of what they put in, the how crazy their ideas were. And to me it feels like they really did put their hearts into it. I feel like they did everything they could with the budget they had and the constraints they had. This is only the director's second film. His first is this really silly, cheesy film called Manborg, but it's silly on purpose. It's one of those really goofy-looking films, kind of like if you've ever seen the short Kung Fury, where everything looks kind of fake, but kind of fake on purpose, like everything's superimposed and all that. But it's fun. Um, so to me, he's an up and coming director to be watched, and I hope this film does well. So they expand upon it because I feel like it could be expanded upon. I don't know. Maybe some of you feel it should be left open, but there's certain things I don't think should be left open. Like I feel like there's certain things about it where I'm just kind of I have questions and I'd love to have answers to those questions. Um, and I don't want to just say this is a fault of the movie that I don't have these answers. I want to say no, 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 no. I want to know more because it's interesting, and it's hard to come down on. It's hard to decide which side it falls on with a movie like this. Without more. Um, but I'm gonna go with my rating would be a 4 out of 5. I'd almost want to go higher because I absolutely loved it, but I'm gonna admit that it has certain drawbacks, certain problems. But oh man, oh man, what a fun movie! Rating could change with rewatches in the future, especially like sometimes when you just look back and you say to yourself, "Wow, that's one of the only horror films I liked from that entire year," or something like that. But yeah, that's how I feel about The Void. Hope you guys watch it and get something out of it. All right, later.